They were on their way up to Jerusalem, with Jesus leading the way, and the disciples were astonished, while those who followed were afraid. Again, he took the 12 aside and told them what was going to happen to him. "We are going up to Jerusalem," he said, "and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him and spit on him and flog him and kill him. 3 days later, he will rise." Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. "Teacher," they said, "we want you to do for us whatever we ask." "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. They replied, "Let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory." "You don't know what you're asking," Jesus said. "Can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with?" "We can," they answered. Jesus said to them, "You will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. But to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared." When the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. Jesus called them together and said, "You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Jesus and the disciples were on their way to Jerusalem, and Jesus spelled out for them exactly what would happen to him. He couldn't have been clearer. The disciples were afraid, but that didn't prevent James and John asking Jesus point blank if they could sit on his right and on his left in heaven. Only they didn't mention heaven. They said, "In your glory." Perhaps they were thinking, even though Jesus couldn't have been clearer, that he would enter Jerusalem as a king. This same incident is written about in Matthew chapter 10, only it isn't James and John who ask this favour, but their mother. It doesn't actually matter if it was them or their mother. Even if it was their mother, we can be pretty sure that her sons put her up to it. Was it a good moment to ask this of Jesus, we might think? Hadn't they learned anything from the 3 years they'd spent with him? Were they even listening to what he had told them many times? Presumably not. But before we judge James and John too harshly, perhaps we should stop and think about our own behaviour. How often do we only hear what we want to hear, instead of listening to what Jesus is actually saying? And if we think about our own prayers, might we find that they often resemble the request of the 2 brothers? A list of things of wanted, a list of favours. Perhaps our prayers aren't that much different from the favour James and John asked of Jesus. Not surprisingly, the other disciples were angry with the 2 brothers when they heard. Perhaps they felt that James and John were trying to steal a march on them, get preferential treatment. And how does Jesus respond to the request? Not by being angry with them, and neither did he fudge the issue by saying, "Well, maybe, we'll see." One of the altogether remarkable things about Jesus is his humility. His touchstone is God, and it's God who decides. So he doesn't rebuke the disciples. As usual, he turns our world upside down when he says, "Whoever wishes to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you must be your slave." So don't let us judge James and John too harshly, but think instead of how often we put ourselves first, rather than in service to others. How often do we put our own needs before the needs of others? What we're talking about is, in a sense, the rules of God's kingdom, set against the rules of the world. God honours service. The world honours wealth and power. And someone who put service to God first is the man whose name we remember today, the Venerable Bede, who was a monk at Jarrow and an historian. He was born in 673 in the north of England, and apart from an occasional visit to York or Lindisfarne, Bede never left Jarrow. But he read widely and gained an international reputation for his writings as historian, theologian, scientist and poet. He wrote around 40 books on a variety of subjects. He introduced into England the method of dating events, BC and AD. He's known today mainly as an historian and has been called the father of English historians for his work. Bede, a humble monk who spent his whole life in the service of God, typifies what Jesus was saying. Jesus challenges us to begin living by the rules of God's kingdom here and now. A big ask and a tough sell, and something we must all try to learn both individually and as a church community. For we're all tempted to put our own interests first, to push our way to the front of the queue. Personal ambition didn't start with James and John and doesn't end with them. So Jesus in this reading didn't rebuke James and John. Instead, he posed the question whether they were able to drink the cup that he was about to drink. In other words, whether they would be able to bear the suffering he would shortly endure. And of course, Jesus accomplishes something the disciples can't. He takes service and sacrifice to the ultimate by giving his life for us on the cross, and he raises us all by his resurrection. And ironically, the men who will be positioned on Jesus' right and left on their crosses at Golgotha will be two thieves. Amen.